Welcome back to another episode of League of Lit reviewing Jules and Monty. And as always, welcome to League of Lit, where we discuss books, adaptations, and anything else we wish to talk about and tie it back to lit because we can.
It is also a truth universally acknowledged that we are not a spoiler-free podcast and we are not a spoiler-free re-review. So watch at your own peril, okay? Okay.
We are in the heavy, emotional, oh my gosh, part of our source material and of our little web series here. So let's just dive right into the emotional turmoil that is episode 15.
This episode begins with Jules by herself, and she says take two, which just really made me laugh because clearly she'd done this more than once. And I appreciate that they decided to put that in because it just feels more authentic, I think.
So right here at the top, it seems like Jules may be in better spirits with where we're seeing her. But she does admit that she is aware of what Nancy did, and so she knows that what Nancy believed needed to not go unseen has in fact been seen. But as far as she knows right now, Cliff hasn't seen it, and but that doesn't mean she's not sitting there wondering what would happen and what will happen when he does, because I think she understands and knows that there will be a time that he will in fact see it, and there probably will be hell to pay, but we'll just kind of see.
We find out that Professor Lawrence has asked Jules into his office, which I love this moment of Jules telling us what's happening and then giving us like a slight little bit of footage of Professor Lawrence, because she goes, which was weird because I've never met him before, so I didn't know what was happening. And it just goes to Professor Lawrence, who's like, you probably wonder why you're here. It's very much like a meta moment where you're like, yes, I understand what we're doing here. I really appreciate the comedic relief after something so heavy in the last episode.
These little like clips that kind of go in and out, it is I mean it's a fun storytelling tactic, um but it's kind of funny to see Professor Lawrence be a little bit fangirlish in the way he gets excited, like, oh, is this going to be on the vlog? Am I going to be on the vlog? Because he watched all of them and he's apparently watched them all multiple times. But let's just find out, why did he bring her in?
Professor Lawrence discusses with Jules that he thinks that she should tell somebody about what's happened, some type of authority figure. He suggests that it would be great to start with her parents, but he understands, he just thinks she needs to say something because there's really nothing he can do. She's too old for him to report it himself. He then also suggests that it might be a good idea for her to transfer because Cliff goes to this school and he can understand her being uncomfortable with the idea of being around Cliff in general. Just, right now, but just in general. And I think it gives Jules a lot to think about.
So we learn that, Professor Lawrence has seen the video and he is advising Juliet to seek counsel, if you will, to seek help and to, you know, he's saying, if you feel uncomfortable, maybe transferring would be wise. And Jules admits that, it's something that she knows he's correct on and that, she really should consider it. Um, but she also shares, so I believe I mentioned in episode 14 that, you know, it's that, well, has this happened before? Or was this the first time this has happened? And what Jules says, I think, gives the impression that it has happened a lot, because one of, I think, the key phrase that she says is that I thought he had outgrown that tendency. Because, yeah, she has a fair point. Siblings fight, of course you do. And, sometimes it happens where you might get hit because that's sometimes the way siblings fight. Um, but maybe this time it felt different, or maybe it wasn't as infrequent as we may think it could be. It may have been a more frequent thing, and that's why at the end of episode 14 we got to see Nancy be reached out to and asked, Jules asking her for help.
Jules also informs us that she has run into a friend, question mark. I loved this moment when she runs into Pierre. It's also really another great behind the scenes moment, them trying to figure out exactly what awkward thing Pierre was going to be doing as he came out of the bathroom. So clearly in the clip you can see he like zips up his fly and he's like trying to be all cool and like French. It's A great moment, and I think this episode really is very uplifting after what we had just watched. It's kind of us getting not only Jules' side of the story and a little bit more information from her, but also just a little bit of a laugh after some really heavy stuff. And I feel a little bad for Pierre because he thinks, oh, I'm gonna date Jules. She's so nice. She's so pretty. It's gonna be great. And Jules doesn't want that. And I think Pierre's just going off of what he's been told by Cliff. So it's really hard because he's never really had that conversation with Jules in any way. So it's definitely, it's silly and it's a little difficult, but it's a fun moment, him like trying to sort of come on to her and talking about their plan for the big things that nobody suspects, except everybody knows he's been trying to set Jules up with Pierre, so it wouldn't really be that shocking, but it's a fun moment.
Then we get to see a fun little thing with Pierre. And I feel like the inserting of Pierre is a level of comic relief in the midst of the heavy topics that are being discussed of will she transfer? What's is she going to do anything that maybe potentially report Cliff for? You know, like these different like really heavy things that are actually going on in Juliet's life. But she does admit that she's not ready to transfer. She feels like everything is like still going really well. Um, but I think to an extent that's a level of like one of the stages of grief where, you know, like maybe she's just used to denying the fact that yes, this is something that she really should. I mean, you see a level of acceptance and like acknowledgement, like, yeah, I need to do something with it. But then you also see the I'm actually not ready for that yet. I think it speaks to Juliet's like where she's just at right now. And it's definitely a lot to take in of, you know, like, okay, what how do I, you know, go through and move forward? Like, can I do that? And, you know, I think there's a lot to process for her. Um, but the end of this episode, y'all, oh my.
So we learn as well that there's a lot of learning in this episode. We learn as well that Jules hasn't heard from Monty in weeks. He's settled in at the University of Mantua, and she just doesn't know what's going on, which is really difficult to see because I think Jules was so secure in their relationship, even with kind of the bad things that were happening. I don't think she expected him to just drop off the face of the planet. So it is a little shocking that he did. Wonder what's happening there. Nancy comes in and hands Jules a letter, which I love this moment of where did you get this? From our mailbox? And Jules is like, I was just down there. And Nancy's like, I don't know. And it turns out the letter's from Monty.
So, with the end of this episode, this is in fact the dagger. I remember the first time that I watched this and being curious. It's like, okay, there's no way that they're going to do death. There's no way that they're going to inadvertently promote suicide because that is, in fact, what happens in the source material. There is a level of suicide that happens. Um, but how are you going to get that oh, happy dagger moment? Like, if you watch the way that that Nancy is in the background, or I mean, kind of the background of the shot, um, you can see on her facial expressions that when Julia is facing the camera, you can see it on Nancy's face that she is trying to hide something, that there is something that she is nervous about. And she is curious and she is careful and wanting to make sure that, you know, she keeps an eye on Juliet. So clearly, there is more to what's going on than what we as the audience are aware of at this point in time. But this letter is the dagger. And this is the start of the end. I mean, we only have 3 episodes left, but there's still so much to unpack in all of this. But that is the end of episode 15. So we will see you next episode. Thanks for tuning in to this very special edition of League of Lit.
Make sure that you follow us at League of Lit Podcast on Instagram and League of Lit Pod on TikTok.
If you have any suggestions for an episode, feel free to leave a comment at leagueoflit.tumblr.com.